Hello, my name is Varela. I was 8 years old the first time they called me a walking virus. They said it was just a sneeze, but that night they sent me away with a suitcase and no goodbye. Years later, after I built a business from silence and grit, they found out I had $12 million. At Christmas dinner, my father slammed his glass down and yelled, "Give it to your sister!" And I smiled, reached for my phone, and pressed a button that changed everything. But what pushed a quiet daughter to cut off her entire family? And why did they think they could keep taking? Until I disappeared. Would you have done the same? I arrived early because I always did, even when I knew it didn't matter. Even when I knew the people behind that door wouldn't greet me with warmth, I showed up anyway. The porch lights flickered with the kind of hesitation I'd grown used to, as if the house itself wasn't sure if I belonged. Balancing two stacked dessert boxes from a French patisserie downtown, I nudged the doorbell with my elbow. No answer. I waited. It wasn't freezing cold outside, but the chill bit at my hands just enough to make the silence feel intentional. After a minute, I opened the door myself. It was never locked, not to me or the mailman or anyone really, because nothing in that house was private except the truth. "Varela's here," someone muttered from the dining room. No one came to the door, no hug, no fake smile, just a muttered notification passed like background noise. I set the desserts on the kitchen island, the boxes pristine, still cold. A woman in a red blazer stood nearby. I didn't recognize her, mid-40s, gold hoops, perfectly curled hair. She gave me a once-over and turned to Isolde. "Who's this?" she asked, half whispering. "Oh, that's Lily's friend," my mother replied, as if she hadn't just outed herself. "Tech support, I think. She helps Lily sometimes." I didn't flinch, didn't speak up, just walked to the fridge and grabbed a glass of water. My name wasn't important in this house, not really. The last time I corrected her, she'd smiled and said, "Oh, honey, don't be so sensitive." Like being forgotten was a choice I'd made. Later that evening, after the dishes had been cleared and the men had drifted into the living room to argue about football, I found myself in the corner of the dining room, next to the sliding door that led to the backyard. That spot was always mine. It used to be my refuge during barbecues when I was a kid, back when I still thought being present might eventually earn me a seat at the table. My eyes landed on the fireplace mantel. Photos lined the top. All recent. All of Lily. Lily at a nonprofit gala. Lily with her boyfriend at Joshua Tree, Lily in a graduation robe, which I knew belonged to me because I remembered that exact tear on the sleeve. I loaned it to her. She never returned it. I stood there a while, long enough that the hum of voices faded into static. And then it came, a voice from my memory, sharp and sterile. "Get her out of here!" It was Thanksgiving. I was 8. I had sneezed once, just once, but in the post-flu hysteria that swept through our family that year, it was enough. "She's a walking virus," my mother hissed. "Call Celine. She's already exposed us all." Celine arrived 30 minutes later. She didn't say much, just wrapped me in my coat and led me to her car. "It's just for the weekend," she promised, buckling me in. It wasn't. For the next 9 years, every time I coughed, every time I looked pale, every time someone in the house got sick, I was shipped off. To Celine. To a second cousin in Akron. Once even to a former babysitter. I was passed around like a potentially contaminated package. My room became a storage closet. Lily moved into a bigger room with lavender walls and shelves filled with American Girl dolls. My books were boxed up and left in the garage. "You're not being punished," Isolde would say, folding towels. "You're just delicate. We're trying to protect you." But I wasn't being protected. I was being erased. Quietly, efficiently. I learned to read people the way others read novels. I watched for eye rolls, for dismissive nods, for smiles that didn't reach the eyes. It became second nature, knowing when I wasn't wanted. By the time I was 13, I stopped protesting. When Lily turned 10, she had a garden party. I made cupcakes. Spent the night before baking 3 dozen in Celine's cramped kitchen. I was so proud. At the party, Isolde pulled me aside. "Sweetheart, could you stay in the kitchen? We don't want too many people crowding the yard." I stood behind the curtain and watched. One of the mothers turned to Isolde and asked, "Is that the babysitter?" Isolde laughed. "Something like that." That was the moment. Not when I was sent away. Not when my name was left off the school directory. Not when my science fair trophy was accidentally thrown out. That moment, when my mother couldn't even say my name to a stranger, that was when I stopped expecting anything. Back in the present, Martin lifted his glass. "To family," he declared, his voice echoing slightly off the vaulted ceiling. "To Lily." Everyone raised their glasses. I reached for mine, a simple water glass. No one noticed I wasn't holding wine. No one cared that I hadn't spoken in over an hour. Isolde turned to me, smile frozen in time. "You're still quiet as always, Varela." I held her gaze for just a moment longer than polite. "That's because I learned silence was safer." She blinked. Maybe she heard it. Maybe she didn't. Maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was that I said it. And just like that, the air shifted. Peace was the last thing I felt on my own birthday. I was 18, living alone in a studio apartment with peeling linoleum floors and a view of the parking lot where neighbors left cigarette butts in old coffee cans. It was my first birthday away from everyone, and still, I hadn't expected much, but I did expect something. A phone call, a text, anything. The day had been quiet. I'd gone to my classes, worked a double shift at the campus bookstore, and stopped by a gas station to grab a cupcake with sprinkles. When I got home, I lit one candle, dimmed the lights, and whispered, "Happy birthday" to me, like I was rehearsing a lie I didn't believe in. I checked my phone. Not a single message. Not even a forwarded meme or a family group chat. "Miss you." Just silence, thick and final. Except one thing. A letter taped to the inside of my mailbox, the old-fashioned kind you had to unlock with a rusted key. It was from Celine, my aunt, the only person who ever asked if I was okay without expecting me to answer quickly. She wrote, "I know it's not easy being the one no one sees, but your life will be bigger than this silence. It already is." I held that note long after the candle fizzled out. I still have it. 6 years later, I sent my first wire transfer home, not for me, of course, for Lily. Mom called, frantic. "Your sister's tuition at Belmont is short this semester. It's been a rough year. Could you help?" I didn't even ask how much. I just asked where to send it. I was building a new client base then, running data scrubs for a security firm. The money didn't come easy, but I'd been trained since childhood to give without being thanked. The money went through the next day. No one called to say they got it. A week later, I saw a photo on Lily's Instagram. She was standing under a balloon arch that read, "Happy 22nd birthday," holding a 3-tiered cake covered in edible gold leaf. The caption read, "Feeling so loved. Thank you, Mom and Dad, for everything. Everything." I wanted to tell myself the tuition got handled separately, that the party was planned long before. But I knew the exact number I had wired. I recognized the venue from an invoice I'd seen in a folder on Mom's desk once. I knew what it meant when someone said, "It's covered." It meant I paid, and they took credit. Still, I said nothing. A year after that, I tried something foolish. I tried to believe that maybe things had changed. I booked a tiny restaurant, one of those family-owned Italian spots with too many photos on the wall and red checkered tablecloths that felt like someone's home. I invited everyone. Mom, Dad, Lily, even cousins who never remembered my birthday when we were kids. No one showed. At 7:15, the waiter came over. "Would you like us to bring out the cake?" he asked gently. I looked at the chocolate sheet cake I'd brought, still in its cardboard box. "No," I said. "Just pack it up. I'll take it home." Back at my apartment, I sat at the kitchen table and wrote in my journal, "Maybe this is how strong people are born, in empty chairs and melted candles." That cake lasted me 3 days. It was delicious. The following spring, I transferred another $2,000 to Mom. "For Lily's business license," she said. "She's really taking off now. So proud of her." No one asked if I had filed my own taxes yet. No one asked if I was sleeping. Then came the Christmas dinner from hell. We were all seated. I had brought 2 bottles of wine, a fruit tart, and a rosemary roasted chicken because Isolde always acted surprised when I showed up empty-handed. The tart was untouched. Lily had already posted a selfie with the store-bought cake Mom got for her earlier. Halfway through dinner, Lily leaned over her glass of sparkling cider and said, "Remember that Paris-themed party I had at 22? That was so dreamy." She turned to me. "You covered that, didn't you?" Mom added. "Of course she did. Our Varela has always been generous, even when she had nothing." Dad chuckled, stabbing his ham. "Yeah, no matter what, she always found a way to help. That's our girl." I gripped my fork so tightly I thought the metal might bend. I smiled. They didn't know that month I skipped rent by 3 days. They didn't know I borrowed against my own health insurance. They didn't know I worked 6 weekends in a row to make up for it. They just knew the check cleared. I didn't say a word. I never did. But that night, as I washed the wine glasses in their kitchen, I counted how many had lipstick marks that weren't mine. And I thought, not for the first time, that maybe I wasn't born for this family. Maybe I was placed here to survive it. Later, I sat in the guest room, scrolling through old photos I never posted. There was one of the cake from that Italian restaurant, the chocolate one, the one no one saw. They only remembered when it was her celebration, but they forgot who paid the deposit. That thought didn't come from anger. It surfaced like a quiet tide as I stood in the living room, watching Lily gush over her TEDx application. The fireplace crackled beside her, warm light flickering across her face, but none of it reached me. I had taken a step back, near the archway between the kitchen and dining room, careful not to interrupt the show. "This one's about women in tech," Lily said, clicking through her PowerPoint slides on the living room TV. "I need a strong quote to open with. Something that really lands." She scrolled to the second slide. I blinked once, then again. There it was. My line. Word for word from my thesis presentation 2 years ago at Stanford. "When women control the algorithm, they rewrite the outcome." Isolde nodded, oblivious. "Oh, I like that. It sounds expensive." Martin chuckled. "You always were the creative one, Lily." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. Not yet. A few days after the holidays, I returned to the house to pick up some things from the garage. It was early morning. Fog still clung to the grass, and the neighborhood was unusually still. Martin had given me the code to the side door years ago, and it hadn't changed. I stepped inside and was immediately hit with the scent of citrus cleaner and peppermint candles. I made my way up to the attic instead. I don't know why. Maybe I was hoping to find the one thing I hadn't been given in that house, evidence I had mattered. The attic was cluttered, boxes stacked against the wall, each labeled with masking tape. Lily's ballet recitals, Lily's first Christmas, Lily's college send-off. It wasn't until I found a dusty box shoved behind a rack of winter coats that I saw something different. "Memories, Lily's growing up," it read. I sat cross-legged on the wooden floor and opened it. The photos came out in waves. Lily in front of the fireplace holding her kindergarten certificate. Lily on the swing set at age 10, cake all over her face. Lily in a pink gown at prom, with Mom beaming at her side. I flipped through each one, faster with each turn. Not a single photo of me, not even one of us together. Then, near the bottom, I found a group shot, Thanksgiving, maybe 2003. Martin, Isolde, Lily, and a few cousins smiling around the dining table. I was there, barely. My hand, cropped and blurred, resting on the chair next to Lily. That was it. I sat back, holding the photo like it might burn through my palm. I always wondered why my name wasn't in the captions. Now I knew. I'd been written out before I even left the room. Years before that attic visit, I had worked my way through high school by building things. Robotics competitions, engineering fairs. I spent weekends soldering circuits while Lily was off at cheer camp. I earned a perfect SAT score. Not near perfect, not really good. Perfect. No one framed that letter. No one took a picture of me holding it. When I got into the University of Chicago with a scholarship, Isolde called it an intense environment. She told everyone I was doing data stuff. Meanwhile, when Lily got a C+ in English, Martin printed the grade report and taped it to the fridge. "She fought hard for that," he said. "Some kids just need more support." I taught myself Python by junior year of college, ran simulations for lab projects, joined a startup that failed but taught me everything. At 29, I enrolled in the executive MBA program at Stanford. I told them over Sunday dinner, thinking, stupidly, that maybe this would be the thing. Isolde smiled over her fork. "Oh, one of those online hobby programs. That's sweet." Lily tilted her head, genuinely curious. "Are you trying to pivot into, like, candles or soaps? I know someone with an Etsy shop who'd love a business plan." I didn't respond, not because I was ashamed, but because I had learned by then that explaining my achievements in that house was like whispering into a canyon. It only echoed back with someone else's voice. My MBA was hard earned. Remote didn't mean easy. I led group strategy meetings with CEOs in Germany and Brazil. I worked with professors who didn't care that I wasn't from Harvard. They cared that I delivered, and I did. When I finally graduated, I didn't tell anyone. I booked a photographer for myself, just me in a gray wool blazer, holding a sign that read, "From invisible to inevitable." I posted it on my LinkedIn. Martin commented, "So proud of all our daughters." I let it stay. That night after the TEDx slide incident, I went back home, my home, and pulled out my original thesis. I had saved every draft, every peer-reviewed comment, every revised line. The quote Lily had used, my quote, was on slide 6, marked with a sticky note that read, "Anchor this." I didn't send an email. I didn't confront her. I added it to a folder on my desktop labeled Proof. That folder had grown a lot in recent years. What stunned me most wasn't that Lily had used my words. It was how easily everyone accepted them as hers, how comfortable the family was with attributing brilliance to her when it had never been her strength. She was charming, beautiful, socially adept, but she didn't build anything. I did. But that never mattered in our house. The ones who built were expected to hand over the blueprints and step aside. 2 days later, I got a group text. "Family dinner Sunday, Lily's big announcement." I replied with a thumbs up. Then I opened my folder and began reviewing the files. Because I knew the announcement wouldn't be about what she built. It would be about what I had already made and what she was going to claim next. They thought I wouldn't. I didn't storm out. I didn't slam the door or yell or even flinch. I sat through that Sunday dinner like a guest at someone else's wedding, smiling at the wrong times, nodding at people who didn't remember my name, quietly waiting for it to be over. But inside, I had already drawn the line. It started with a slide. The phrase "empowered through code" was splashed across Lily's TEDx presentation draft, displayed proudly on the living room TV. That wasn't a coincidence. That was a direct lift from my Stanford pitch. I had rehearsed that phrase in the mirror at 2 a.m., muttered it into my pillow after too many cold coffees and deadlines. "Where'd you get that?" I asked, careful not to sound accusing. Lily didn't even glance at me. "It came to me. Sometimes inspiration just shows up, you know?" I knew. The rest of the family nodded as if brilliance were a bloodline, and Lily had inherited it all. No one questioned it. Why would they? I'd taught them for decades that I didn't raise my hand, that I didn't ask for credit. Later that night, back at my apartment, I opened the original file from my MBA presentation. There it was, slide 4. Same font, same phrasing. I opened my folder titled Callista Archives and dropped it in. That folder had grown steadily over the past 2 years. One entry was a blurry Instagram story from the launch event of her so-called startup. It wasn't even the caption that caught my attention. It was the vision board behind her, partially visible, featuring a customer workflow diagram I'd designed during an accelerator program. A diagram I'd once emailed Mom, asking for thoughts. "Looks too complicated," she'd said. "Why don't you just help Lily with her social media instead?" Turns out, it wasn't too complicated to steal. I hadn't planned to attend that brunch the following Sunday, but Isolde sent a voice message, something she rarely did, saying, "It's important you be there. Lily's got an announcement and it would mean a lot." I went. Maybe I was curious. Maybe I wanted to see how deep they'd dig before realizing they were standing on my shoulders. The announcement was what I expected. Lily had been selected for a Women in Innovation feature in a local business magazine. There were claps, a champagne toast, and a half-hearted speech from Martin about raising daughters who do big things. I was about to excuse myself when Lily's boyfriend, Ian, leaned over. "You know," he whispered, just close enough, "you're the real genius. I've seen the files." I turned my head slowly. His breath smelled faintly of bourbon. My eyes met his without blinking. He smiled. "Dinner sometime?" I didn't answer, just reached for my phone under the table, opened the messages, and forwarded his text straight to Lily. No caption, no warning. Then I put the phone face down and finished my mimosa. That should have been the end of it, but drama never ends quietly in our family. 2 days later, I walked into Sunday dinner and barely had my coat off before Lily slammed her phone on the kitchen island. "You trying to ruin my life now?" Martin looked up from the ham he was carving. "What's going on?" "She's sending me screenshots from Ian," Lily snapped, pointing at me like I'd pulled the fire alarm. Isolde stepped in, soft and sugary. "Let's not do this now. It's a family night." Lily rounded on me again. "You're jealous, aren't you? You've always been bitter because people actually like me." I held her gaze. "People don't like you. They tolerate the story you've told them about yourself." Martin slammed his palm flat on the table. "Enough!" He turned to me, anger crawling across his face. "Why do you always have to ruin her moments?" I didn't respond immediately. I let the question hang like stale air. Isolde walked over and placed a hand on my arm. "Don't ruin her moment again, sweetheart. Let her have this." That's when I realized. To them, Lily's moments were sacred. Mine were optional. I stepped back. "I didn't ruin anything," I said quietly. "I just stopped pretending it wasn't mine in the first place." I drove home that night without turning the radio on. My thoughts were louder than any noise. At home, I made tea. Jasmine from a tin Aunt Celine had mailed me last fall. As I waited for the kettle to whistle, I opened my email, found the folder again, and added the new screenshots. Lily's captions, Ian's text, the blurry vision board. Each one went into a subfolder labeled Evidence of Pattern. It wasn't about revenge, it was about proof. The next morning, I woke up before dawn. Sat at my desk, opened a blank document, and titled it, "If this continues, I will act." I listed every incident, every document, every copied idea. I labeled them by date, by event, by source. Then I saved the file. I didn't send it anywhere, not yet. But I was done pretending I was just the background in Lily's story, because they were about to ask for even more. It had been 4 days since the dinner where I laid out my boundaries with the calm of a woman who'd been dismissed one too many times. I'd barely caught my breath from that exchange when I got the first alert. "New account activity reported under your social security number." The notification blinked on my phone like a warning flare. I tapped in, heart steady. I already knew it wasn't good. It was a car loan, $38,000, co-signed by me. Except, I hadn't signed a damn thing. My name, my credit score, my liability, all attached to a cherry red SUV currently registered under Callista Avery. And here's the kicker. It had been active for nearly 6 months. I closed my laptop, grabbed my keys, and drove straight to the bank. Not because I thought they'd fix it quickly, but because I needed to hear someone say it out loud. Yes, someone used your name. Yes, someone forged your information. And no one will care unless you scream about it in just the right way. The bank manager, a soft-spoken woman with tired eyes and a nameplate that read Janice, blinked twice when I showed her the printouts. "Do you have proof this wasn't authorized?" "I have proof I was never even in this city the week it was filed." She nodded slowly, her fingers tapping on the keyboard. "We'll freeze the account for now, but I recommend putting a fraud alert on your credit. This could be a pattern." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because she had no idea how right she was. By the time I got back home, the sun was dipping behind the trees, casting long shadows across my living room. I dropped my purse, sat on the couch, and opened a blank email. The subject line was simple: immediate action required. I addressed it to both Martin and Isolde. If my name is used without consent again, I will involve legal authorities. No more warnings. I hit send, not out of rage, but resolve. I'd spent my entire adult life building things, protecting myself quietly, but this wasn't silence. This was theft. 2 days passed, no reply, not even a passive-aggressive thumbs up from Martin. Then, mid-afternoon, I got a voicemail from Isolde. "You're being dramatic, sweetheart. It's just a formality. Families help each other. Why would you bring lawyers into it?" "Because you taught me not to trust what's done behind closed doors." Sunday rolled around faster than I wanted, but I showed up anyway. That was still the rule in our family. You don't miss dinner unless you're dying or dead. The dining room was dressed to impress. Linen napkins, gold-rimmed glasses, an actual centerpiece with floating candles. Isolde always did love to overcompensate. I took my usual seat near the end, next to the window. Callista sat at the head, beaming like the queen of someone else's parade. "To Callista," Isolde announced, lifting her flute of champagne. "For growing her brand and staying authentic." Everyone raised their glass. Everyone except me. I had water. Martin glanced over. "Can't you just be proud of your sister for once?" I looked at him, measured, calm. I am proud of people who build, not those who borrow and never return. Silence. Just for a moment. Then Lily laughed, soft and dismissive. "Always so serious." Isolde waved a hand. "She's always been the intense one." I reached into my bag and pulled out a red folder. Simple, thick, weighted with 6 months' worth of statements, emails, call logs, and side-by-side comparisons of my signature versus the forged one. I placed it on the table, right in front of Isolde. "What's this?" she asked, her smile faltering. "Receipts," I said. "Proof of who signed what. Proof of what's in my name. Proof of what's been taken without permission." She reached for it, but I moved it back toward me. "This time, I keep the receipts." Callista rolled her eyes. "God, it's not that deep." Martin leaned forward. "You really want to turn this into a court battle over a misunderstanding?" I met his stare without flinching. "I don't want anything, but I will protect myself. If any of you use my name again, it won't be a conversation. It'll be litigation." Isolde pressed her lips together. "Don't threaten us. We're family." I shook my head. "Exactly. And that used to mean something." The rest of the dinner went on in a quiet tension. Callista bragged about a brand collab with a skincare line that sounded made up. Martin kept sipping wine like it was going to change the subject. Isolde kept eyeing the red folder like it might bite her. After dessert, I helped clear the table. Out of habit. Some scars don't fade. They just shift into muscle memory. That night, back home, I scanned every document in the folder into a secure drive. I labeled each file with timestamps and keywords. I backed it up twice, once to the cloud and once to an encrypted USB. Then I opened a new document. Timeline of forgery and financial exploitation. It wasn't revenge. It was protection. I added a final line. Let them try and twist this. Because the next time they questioned what I gave, I wouldn't answer with words. I'd answer with evidence. They didn't chase after me. They plotted instead. That's the thing about silence. People mistake it for surrender. They assume if you're not yelling, if you're not throwing plates or crying in the driveway, you're weak. But silence can be a choice, a scalpel instead of a hammer. And that Christmas night, I wielded it like a surgeon. After I left the house, I didn't go straight home. I needed to breathe. I parked 3 blocks away from my apartment, walked through the quiet residential streets in flats that pinched and a coat that suddenly felt too thin. The air was cold but crisp, the kind that stung your lungs on purpose. I stopped at the corner cafe that miraculously stayed open late on holidays, ordered peppermint tea. The girl behind the counter asked if I wanted whipped cream. I said no. Too much sweetness after too much poison. Back in my apartment, I kicked off my shoes and sat at my desk. I opened my laptop, the same one Callista had poked through earlier that evening when she came into my childhood room uninvited, looking for a charger. The same laptop she used to stumble across my open dashboard. One glance and she'd seen the number, my company's operating account balance, $12.4 million. That's what had cracked the evening wide open. She hadn't knocked. She never did. I heard her voice ring out from the hallway as she marched toward the dining room, laptop in hand like a smoking gun. "She's rich!" she shouted, as if I'd hidden gold in the backyard. Forks clattered, glasses paused midair. I walked in slowly, hands still damp from washing them. "What are you talking about?" Martin asked, his eyes narrowing. Callista spun the laptop around, pointing at the screen. "Look, $12 million. She's been hoarding it while we've been struggling to pay taxes, tuition, everything. She let me drive that beat-up Corolla while she had this." Isolde stood up so fast her chair tipped. "Are you serious, Varela? You let us beg while you sat on a fortune?" I didn't reply right away. I reached for my laptop, calmly slid it back to my side of the table, and closed it. Martin's voice cut in, thick with accusation. "We raised you. You owe this family." Callista, still flushed, added, "You wouldn't even be in tech if I hadn't introduced you to that coding camp. Don't act like you built this on your own." That was the line that nearly made me laugh. Instead, I walked to the kitchen, grabbed a napkin, and dried my hands again. My fingers were trembling, not from fear, but from restraint. When I came back into the room, everyone was watching me like a stranger who'd just walked in with bad news. I stood at the end of the table and looked at each of them, one by one. "You don't raise a child by ignoring her for 2 decades, I said quietly. Martin blinked. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said, "that you don't get to demand a share of something you had no hand in building. You don't get to claim rights over someone you made invisible." Isolde gasped. "You've always had a roof over your head. You think we didn't sacrifice?" I nodded. "You did. For Callista." "She's your sister," Isolde snapped. "A real daughter would help her sister." I felt my jaw tighten. But instead of yelling, I walked over to the laptop and opened it. I pulled up my banking interface, found the recurring transfer I had been sending them. $7,000 a month, every month for the past 3 years. I hovered over the cancel button for less than a second. Click. Then I opened the legal freeze I had prepared, restricting access to any accounts, authorizations, or business information tied to my name. Click. Then I turned around. I gave without being asked. I gave because I thought it meant something. But giving in silence only taught you that I owed you more. So now, I stop, in silence too. They stared at me. No one moved, not even Callista. "You're not family anymore," Martin said, the words jagged and sharp. "No," I replied. "I was never really allowed to be." I walked toward the door. My coat was still hanging on the hook. I didn't rush. I didn't slam anything. I pulled on my boots, zipped up my coat, and stepped outside. Snow had started falling, light, sparse flakes that melted as soon as they touched the ground. I walked to my car and sat behind the wheel for a while. I didn't cry. I didn't call anyone. I just watched the windshield fog slowly from the inside. That night, back at my apartment, I checked the transfers one last time to make sure they had been canceled. They had. I slept better than I had in years. The next morning, I woke up to 3 missed calls and 2 texts from Isolde. "We need to talk. This isn't how family handles things." I didn't reply, because they weren't trying to talk. They were trying to regroup. I knew how they worked. They didn't chase after me. They plotted instead. They didn't chase after me. They plotted instead. It began the very next morning. I hadn't even finished my first cup of coffee when Martin called. The screen flashed, "Dad," as if the word still applied. I let it ring until voicemail picked up. 30 seconds later, the message came through. "You don't live here anymore. Don't come back." No greeting, no pause, just that flat, clipped tone I'd heard since I was 10 years old. The kind of voice that only came out when he felt insulted, and apparently refusing to bankroll their household made me a traitor. 15 minutes later, I received a text from Isolde. "We thought you were better than this." No punctuation, no apology, just another layer of passive aggression wrapped in disappointment, like all her love notes had been. I didn't reply. Instead, I grabbed 2 empty boxes from my coat closet, drove back to the house, and let myself into the garage. The lock hadn't changed. Of course not. Security was never for them. Only from me. Inside, the air was stale with paint thinner and dust. I quietly packed up what little I had left in that house. A set of photo albums Aunt Celine had saved for me. A bag of old science fair trophies no one ever displayed. A raincoat I'd forgotten I owned. That was it. No one came out. No one said goodbye. I loaded the boxes into the trunk of my car and drove off without looking in the rearview mirror. That chapter, at least, I could close on my own terms. But their chapter was just getting started. 2 days later, I was tagged in a Facebook post by someone I barely remembered from high school. It was a shared image from Callista's page. Raised a millionaire, abandoned by her. Below it was a picture of Martin in bed, looking frail and overdramatic, clutching his chest like a soap opera character. The caption read, "Left to suffer by the one we gave everything." Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments, neighbors, distant cousins, church ladies who hadn't spoken to me in years. She always seemed off. Well, not everyone appreciates their blessings. I saw her once at Kroger, rude as can be. I scrolled in disbelief, watching people construct a narrative about me like I was a villain in a made-for-TV movie. And the worst part? No one asked if any of it was true. The next blow came 3 days later when a courier arrived at my office with a manila envelope. No return address, but I didn't need one. I already knew. Inside, a legal document, a civil action notice. The plaintiffs, Martin and Isolde Avery, were accusing me of emotional neglect, abandonment of elderly parents, and public defamation of character. I blinked, read the pages twice. Then I slid the papers across my desk to my attorney, Miranda. She'd been with me since my first consulting contract. She barely raised an eyebrow. "It's weak," she said, flipping through the allegations, "but loud and public." That was the point. They didn't want to win. They wanted to shame me. So I gave them the one thing they'd never expected, a full, detailed response. That night, I built a portfolio that would make a forensic accountant proud. Every bank statement from the last 5 years, $7,000 a month sent without fail, every 30th to Isolde's account. Callista's car lease, signed under my name, photos, signatures, even the timestamp on the notary's digital file. Pharmacy receipts for Martin's medications, ordered and paid for from my card. Catering invoices from 2 Christmases ago, because apparently we can't afford a holiday dinner, meant, "You'll cover it, right?" Tuition letters for Lily's marketing program, along with the wire receipts from my business account. I labeled each file clearly, cross-referenced dates, created a timeline. At the top of the binder, I wrote in bold, "Let them bring it to court." The next morning, I got a call from a local TV station. A woman named Amanda from Channel 12. She was working on a segment about elder neglect and said Callista had come forward with a story about her estranged tech mogul sister. I didn't yell. I didn't panic. I thanked Amanda for the call and politely declined the interview. Then I forwarded her the legal documents I had received, along with proof of payment summaries and a short statement. I wrote, "Please find enclosed the civil suit served to me by the individuals claiming neglect. Supporting evidence is attached. I trust you value accuracy in your reporting." She didn't respond, but the segment never aired. Still, Callista wasn't done. That afternoon, my company's Instagram was tagged in a viral TikTok. The video was a montage of family photos, dramatic piano music, and Callista crying on camera. "She said she loved us," she wept into the lens. "But when we needed her most, she disappeared." Hashtags flooded in. Hashtag heartless, hashtag family betrayal. When money changes. People. The video got 92,000 views in 2 days. I activated a legal takedown, sent a cease and desist, and then I did the hardest thing of all. I said nothing, because I knew what they were really afraid of. Me speaking clearly. Me stepping into the light they worked so hard to steal. Me, in court, with facts, not feelings. But I wasn't done. I had one place left to reclaim. The courthouse was colder than I expected, not in temperature, but in tone. the kind of sterile, echoing quiet that made every footstep sound accusatory. I arrived early, as I always did, holding a worn leather folder in my arms. It wasn't fancy, but it held years of silence organized into neat rows of evidence. I didn't bring anyone with me. No entourage, no moral support, no dramatic tears. Just me and a record of what they had taken. As I walked through the security checkpoint, the guard gave me a nod. He had probably seen 1,000 people like me, nervous, quiet, holding too much weight in their hands. I thanked him and moved forward. Callista, Martin, and Isolde arrived together. Callista in heels too loud for a courthouse, Isolde draped in her usual air of false fragility, Martin wearing a blazer like it was armor. The three of them looked like they had coordinated outfits and narratives. Behind them, a local reporter whispered to her cameraman, angling for a shot. I didn't give her one. I kept walking until I reached the courtroom door. I stood for a moment, hand on the handle. This time, I don't sit in the hallway. I walk into the center. Inside, the judge looked young. Too young, but focused. The court clerk called the case, and we all stood. My attorney, Miranda, placed her files on the desk, unbothered, calm. She knew this was theater. She also knew we'd rehearsed better. The plaintiffs presented their statement first. Martin stood. His voice cracked at all the right moments. We raised her. We gave her everything. She was ungrateful. She turned her back on us. We were humiliated, emotionally and publicly, and all we asked for was recognition. Callista took the stand next. She's been jealous since we were kids, she said with a sigh. I tried to include her in everything. I even helped her start her company. But she started lashing out when people started recognizing me, and now she's trying to erase us. Then came the phrase that almost made Miranda snort. She exploited our family image for her own gain. My turn. Miranda stood. No dramatic gestures. No raised voice. Your Honor, she said, we have receipts. The courtroom dimmed slightly as the projector turned on. The first slide showed 10 consecutive years of bank transfers, $7,000 monthly, always on time, dates, amounts, routing numbers. Then came the screenshots. Callista's TEDx draft, side by side with my MBA thesis. Highlighted lines. Identical phrasing. Next, forged signatures on a vehicle lease, verified by a forensic specialist. Then, social media posts using my company's brand name without permission, tagging inflammatory hashtags. Finally, a string of text messages and emails, including one where Isolde referred to me as a walking virus. Another where Martin wrote, she's not really part of this family anymore. The room shifted. No one gasped, but people leaned forward. The press scribbled faster. Even the judge's brows drew in. Martin stood, voice louder this time. None of this matters. We raised her. She owes us her life. I stood. No, I said. You raised a reputation. I raised myself. My voice didn't shake. It didn't need to. I spoke only once more during the trial. When the judge asked if I had anything to add, I walked to the evidence cart, lifted a manila envelope, and handed it over. Inside was a letter from Aunt Celine, written years ago, after one of the many Thanksgivings I spent at her place instead of home. It wasn't emotional, just factual. She listed the number of times I'd been dropped off due to illness. Included a note. Varela always packed her own bag. No one else ever did. Isolde broke down on the stand. I didn't mean to erase her, she sobbed. I just didn't know how to juggle it all. I wanted to keep the family together. The judge didn't flinch. You cannot preserve family by erasing one member from it. The room quieted again. 30 minutes later, the ruling was clear. The case was dismissed with prejudice. All claims against me invalidated. I was advised to pursue counterclaims if I chose to. I didn't respond. Not there, not then. I simply stood, gathered my folder, and walked out. No cameras, no mic drop, no victory speech, just the sound of my heels echoing in a space that finally felt neutral. As I stepped into the winter air, a breeze swept through the parking lot, lifting the edge of my coat. I closed my eyes for a moment, letting the cold settle against my skin. I had survived the house, I had survived the courtroom, but I wasn't done. I had one place left to reclaim. The court ruling was over. The final document, signed, sealed, notarized, had been filed and stored away. Official, final, uncontested. I walked out of the courthouse, not with elation, not with the cinematic feeling of triumph, but with a single manila folder clutched in one hand and an unnameable vacancy in my chest. No cheering, no fists raised in vindication, just silence. And not the peaceful kind. It felt like the echo after a party ends. After the guests go home, after the music cuts off mid-chorus, after the lights flicker on too bright and the confetti becomes clutter. That strange, unsettled quiet, where nothing has gone wrong, but something is clearly missing. That feeling trailed me for days, until Tuesday morning. I was midway through pouring my second cup of coffee when my inbox pinged. I didn't think much of it, spam probably. A sale, a calendar alert, a newsletter I never subscribed to. But the subject line gave me pause. Property auction notification, delinquent tax seizure. The parcel address hit me like a wave crashing too fast, 320 Rosewood Lane. The house I'd grown up in, the house that never held a photo of me on the mantle, that coughed me out like a seasonal allergy, as if I was the contaminant ruining the air. The house where every accusation had roots and no apology had leaves. They hadn't paid the taxes. After everything, after the courtroom dramatics and social media speeches about family values and dignity under pressure, they'd let it slip away. Not for betrayal or secrets or lies, for money, for unpaid property levies they were too proud or too careless to manage. I stared at the screen, not angry, not shocked, just still. Then I clicked Add to Calendar under the auction notice. No hesitation, no fanfare. I didn't tell anyone. Not Miranda, not Celine, not even Joelle, who would have made a celebratory playlist and insisted on driving me there with cupcakes in the passenger seat. I showed up alone. Sat in the back, behind sunglasses and a long trench coat like I was protecting my anonymity, though no one was looking. I watched silently while flippers, investors, and hopeful renovators drove up the price with quick nods and numbers on notepads. Then, at the perfect moment, when interest had peaked and plateaued, I made my move. I bid, not high, not flashy, just enough to win. And I did. The house was mine. 2 weeks later, I returned to 320 Rosewood Lane. Not as a daughter, not as a ghost returning for closure, not as a trespasser, but as the legal owner. I walked through the front door and was met with the same creaking hinges that had startled me as a child. The smell of aged pine sol clung to the baseboards. Mothballs lingered in the coat closet. The floor whined under my weight the same way it had when I was 5, sneaking into the kitchen past bedtime. Some things hadn't changed. The wallpaper still peeled in long strips behind the refrigerator. The outlet in the hallway still didn't work. There was a crack in the upstairs window frame I remembered tracing with my finger during thunderstorms. Familiar and forgotten, I walked the room slowly, not searching for anything, just acknowledging. There was the living room where Lily had pitched her first tantrum because she didn't get the doll with the pink dress. The kitchen where Isolde used to tell me I was in the way when she practiced her grown-up recipes. The dining room, oh, that dining room, where Martin had once said straight-faced, "No one likes a girl who corrects people." Upstairs, I stopped at what used to be my room. The door had been painted over, bland beige now, no trace of the teal trim I'd begged for one summer. The old "Keep Out" sign was long gone. Inside, the room was empty, stripped, except for one cardboard box shoved in the corner, sealed with yellowing tape. I crouched down. The label was faded but legible. Grandma, Keepsakes. I peeled the tape gently. Inside, yellowed holiday cards, delicate doilies, an old crocheted shawl, a dried bouquet wrapped in crinkled ribbon, and at the very bottom, wrapped in tissue, lay the silver brooch, the one Grandma Celine pinned to my coat that night. That night, they sent me away with tears in her eyes and a whisper in my ear. Every brave girl needs a shield. I held it in my hand, cold, heavy, solid. It didn't burn, but it pulsed. 3 days later, I moved in. Not because I needed the space. My modern condo downtown, with the clean lines, the minimalist lighting, the new appliances, was still mine. But this house owed me a conversation. So I gave it one. I unpacked slowly, intentionally. No rush. I filled the space with lavender-scented candles, warm lighting, soft throw blankets. I set up a standing desk in the dining room, my dining room now, where I planned to work remotely. I brought in books, rugs, mugs, but no shrines, no family portraits, just one photo. On the mantel, a frame. Inside, a picture of me and Grandma Celine on the back porch, caught mid-laughter. Her hand rests on my shoulder. My eyes are squinted from sunlight, not from sadness, just light, no parents, no sisters, just her and me. 3 days into living there, a message pinged across my phone. Callista. It was never about the money. I was scared you'd leave us. I read it once, twice, then I deleted it. Deleted the thread. Deleted the contact from my phone. Some things don't deserve storage space. That Sunday morning, I brewed coffee, sat at my new desk, and opened my laptop. Through the window, I saw the old rose bush near the fence, still standing, still blooming. Despite years of neglect, of frost and dry seasons, it had survived. That afternoon, I walked out to the garden. The soil was compacted, tough, but not dead. I dug my fingers into the earth and smiled. I'd learned how to make things grow, even in places others gave up on. Back inside, I pinned the silver brooch to the collar of my sweater. It glinted in the afternoon sun, silent and strong. I stood in the doorway and whispered aloud. They called me a virus. Then I paused, let the air carry it. But I rebuilt a life no shame could touch. I stood there until dusk, until the sky shifted from orange to navy, then to black velvet scattered with stars. Inside, the house was quiet, not empty, and that was the difference. The difference was me. Some families don't break you with fists or words, they do it with silence, expectation, and entitlement. But sometimes the quietest person in the room becomes the one who finally says, enough. What would you do if the people who raised you believed they owned your success? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if you want more real-life revenge stories that speak to the strength behind quiet resilience, don't forget to subscribe. More powerful stories are on the way.